Hello and welcome everyone. After a relatively long hiatus, the three wise men are back with another episode. We will be reviewing the Premier League and the entire season today. Let's start with Arsenal of all. Arsenal finished fifth and they won the FA Cup. This was the same as United last season, and United went ahead and spent some money and hired a manager that would take them up top. Wenger has renewed his contract. Guys, what do you all think? With the likes of they've been carrying players like Gabriel and Walcott for a while. Does Arsene Wenger and Arsenal, for the size that they are, have what it takes to go out there and sign the best and create a concerted challenge for the title next season? Shannon?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with that question. Last year, if you compare to United, same position as Arsenal, fifth in the table, winning the FA Cup, and United go ahead and replace Van Gaal with Jose Mourinho, and well, in hindsight, it was a good season for United. But talking about Arsenal now, they have to spend pretty much the same amount of money that United did, so that they can strengthen the squad with more qualified world class talent. And I don't know whom they are going to get, but it looks like Sanchez is going to leave and Ozil is on the fence. So they might lose more quality than they might put into their team. So it might be a tricky summer for them up ahead.
Yeah, what do you go ahead? Go ahead, Sid. I was just going to ask. With them having to spend time keeping their best players, what do you think they're going to do? What sort of a summer are they going to have, and how do you sum up their season so far?
No, we were talking about Arsenal needing to make world-class signings. I think if they've already done that in the shape of Sad Kolasinac on a free signing from Germany. So it tells us again that he's a Wenger type of a signing. He doesn't want to spend money, and I don't see anything changing. Honestly, I think all that will happen is maybe they'll end up top four again, and he can leave on a relative high compared to this season. But I don't see much changing. As Shannon said, there's going to be more exits than entries, and Arsenal are going to do really, really well to attract world-class signings. We've seen what happened with Mbappe. I mean, Madrid made a £123 million bid, and Arsenal started their bidding with £89 million for some reason. So they're trying to compete with the powerhouses, so-called, of Europe, but I don't think they will be able to.
Shannon, I want to go back to this season. How do you, or rather last season now, they signed a couple of players. They signed Mustafi. They had Rob Holding. How did you think of their performance over the season as well? One thing that I found different from Wenger was he switched to a back three towards the fag end of it. How would you sum up their season for the Arsenal fans out there?
Well, it's always February or March, right? Like that. That's that's when their season falls off the rails for some reason. There was there's a stat go that what Mustafi didn't lose the first 20-25 games in the Premier League before just crashing down the table. But what they lack and what they've been lacking is leadership. You could sign all these players with great potential, but who's there going to lead them? And you can see the exact opposite of what of Mourinho did. He kept Rooney, though in a bit part role, because he knew he was important to the team. He kept Carrick. That was one of the first things he did when he took over as United manager, was give Carrick a 1-year extension, and he brought in Zlatan. Like three big players with winning mentality, and to guide the youngsters along. And now Zlatan's going to be moved on, but Wenger has to do something like that. Have an inspired signing. Maybe he can sign Zlatan since he's released, but that's what they're lacking. That's what they've been lacking for years and years and years now, and doesn't seem like anyone's. Well, Wenger is filling that void, and when they crumble, they just fall apart, and it's season after season so far.
Yeah, they can
Yeah, I
sign that.
think
They can sign that Mbappe, but as Shan said, come February, March, they need that person in the dressing room. That Vieira, keen like figure who can pick them up in a bad situation, which clearly there's no one to do that right now. I mean, if they go down big time.
Yeah, I think it's a problem for mentality, and like Shannon said, the one of the main reasons is leadership lacking in the middle of the field, and it's something that Arsenal have to address. The thing is, I think it's hard to buy leadership. You can buy quality, but a guy coming into the dressing room cannot, like Zlatan is an exception, but a guy coming into a team cannot be a leader right from the first season. And we need something different from Arsenal this season, the next season in terms of signings. Or Wenger can't stay with the usual. Sid, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, what you say is correct, but then who's to blame? It's Arsenal, right? If you're looking for internal figures to pick you up, it's high time that the likes of Ramsey, Walcott, uh, you know, players who've been there, Petr Cech, who've seen it all for quite a while, they need to step up, and they clearly do not when it comes to, you know, a struggling season like we just saw.
Fair enough. And speaking of teams stepping up, we'll let's switch to Chelsea, who stepped up from 10th all the way to first. The most amazing part that I find about Chelsea. So first off, to throw a couple of stats out there, 30 wins out of 38. That is an incredible amount of consistency. Just 3 games where they lost points outside the top six. Just tremendous numbers and tremendous stats. The second most number of points after the Jose Mourinho Chelsea team in 2004-5. What amazes me about this Chelsea team and what Conte did after that Arsenal game is not only the fact that he switched to a 3-4-3, but the fact that the back five that he picked, those were the same personnel that formed the core of the first team. So I'm talking about Alonso, Gary Cahill on the left, David Luiz, Aspilicueta, and Moses. So three out of those five, Moses, Aspi, and Gary Cahill, you don't think of that as being their kind of first choice positions. Shannon, I know there's been enough talk about the 3-4-3, but more than that, what do you think of the personnel that he's chosen in each role? Even Pedro ahead of Willian in the front three.
So I think what Conte did best was he tried to make sure that his personnel fit the formation rather than the other way around. You see a lot of managers, they have a set formation in mind, set way of playing in mind, and they try to fit players in there that might not be as comfortable, that might be a little bit out of their comfort zone. But what Conte did, and Conte did brilliantly, was make sure that his formation suited players' strengths and sort of hide their weaknesses. Right, he needed a ball playing center forward. He got David Luiz, but he knew that David Luiz is terrible one-on-one defending, and so that's why he had the third center back step into his formation. He got Alonso in, who can bomb up and down the left flank. He had a similar player in Moses, and he used them to great effect. But then if you look at the other players, like they sort of pick for themselves, right? He got Kante in, and he can do one role and he does it really well. Matic also, to show things up, and he gave like the freedom of the park to Hazard to just stay on the half line, and when you get the ball, just counter. And he used it to great effect. I would say it was a great Premier League season for Chelsea. Maybe a little disappointed by the way they turned out in the FA Cup final. Obviously they would have wanted to win that as well. But I think the bigger challenge is coming up next season, where they have Europe, and you would agree with me saying that they have a threadbare squad in terms of they might have 15-16 first team players.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, though this was a great season for them, I think the bigger challenge is coming up next, where they have to play in Europe. Probably they'll be expected to go deep into the cup competitions, and they'll have like months and months of 3 games a week, which they didn't have this season, and they took full advantage of it.
True. I want to get Sid in, and I want to push you on something that you've been very rightly critical of Chelsea for. with Conte winning the season so comprehensively, do you think he has a mandate and he has the long-term security to implement a slightly longer-term plan to include the likes of Nathan Aki and Andreas Christensen and all of the amazing youth products that are coming out of the Chelsea academy? Yes, it seems like Chelsea are going to spend 150, 200 million this season, but there still seems room to include some of these youth players. What are your thoughts on that this season and in going forward?
Oh, Sid is gonna love this question.
I'm all for managers playing when promoting young players. And I'm not referring to United, any team. You look at the likes of Spurs. It's so Everton. It's so exciting to see young players come up. I sincerely hope that Conte is there for the long term. We saw Spurs change their mentality with Pochettino. They were a hire and fire club as well previously. Spurs changed that for the good, and they're one of the best teams in Europe as far as young blood is concerned. I hope so. That's why I say I hope Conte stays for the long term, because we've seen what he's done in 1 year. So it's scary to think of what he can do if he's given 4 or 5 years. But if you're talking about youth, I honestly don't think he's done enough. He had a chance to play. You mentioned Ake, and it was so disappointing for me to see the players walk up to collect the trophy, and Ake missed out on a medal. Just why? Because he didn't have enough appearances. I mean, he was a regular first teamer with Bournemouth up until Christmas, and with Chelsea he didn't even get enough games, which I think is 7, 8, 9 or something like that.
So yeah, just to clarify for the audience, you need a minimum of 5 games.
Yeah, 5 games
to appear in the Premier League. Nathan Aki had 3, and
right.
Yes, because of that he didn't get a medal. Go on.
So yeah, so I mean, we know who Ake is, what he can do. He's proven himself, and it's sad to see that he didn't even get 4 games since Christmas.
Let me push you on that. Let me push you on that. A couple of things. One that Alex Ferguson said very famously is that consistency, especially in the back line, is important. And the second thing I'd like to see is I'm looking for some silver lining here. The Chelsea of 5 years ago would have gone and purchased a defender when Ivanovic wanted to leave in the winter break, when he wasn't getting as much game time. But they went ahead and got back someone who they had sent on loan, as compared to spend another 15-20 million and have both Aki and that player over the summer, and then be like, okay, what do we do with 2 players now? Do you think there is a slight change in approach, or is it just the Chelsea of the old who just don't trust the youth?
Maybe, but there's two ways to look at that. There weren't any players available for them to sign in January. I mean, they're going all out for Bonucci and Sandro right now, which there'll be like 50-60 million plus defenders. So once each. So if let's say, I know you don't like me speculating, but let's say 2 defenders come in. You have Azpilicueta, you have Cahill, you have Moses, you have Alonso. Where does Aki play? Where does Christensen play? So I don't see even the slightest of hope as far as youth is concerned. And to just to prove what I'm saying, Chelsea just sold Solanke to Liverpool for 3 million. He was a great prospect, I feel.
He won the
he just won the World Cup.
Golden Boy Award at the World Cup. So
he just won the Golden Boy Award. So,
and to support your point there, so a couple of things. One is he was smart to run himself out of contract, and so they didn't sell him. But again, it was his smartness where he saw that he is, if you look at the chatter around the Chelsea fan box and all of that, there's already talk of Tammy Abraham. So Dominic Solanke, who is a year or 2 years elder, he was kind of already out of the who's the next big thing out of Chelsea's academy. So Chelsea have suffered in the past because of this. Ryan Bertrand, Romeu, Kevin De Bruyne are just few of the countless examples. Dominic Solanke might be another one. Are Chelsea just learning the hard way? What are they getting out of this? Go ahead,
and I've said this before. It's not Conte. It comes from Abramovich and his he's craving for short-term success, which you're not gonna get with youth. So if Roman Abramovich changes, things will change as far as youth is concerned as Chelsea. But I mean, regardless of them playing youth, I think they have a great team. If they add a couple of players, they're again going to be, as good as they were this season, or maybe better.
So yeah, we'll definitely do a Chelsea special where we'll dig into this a little bit more in detail. But speaking of best places for youngsters to grow, Shannon, what do you think is kind of the 2, 3, 4 clubs, Premier League clubs, that if you are a 17-year-old who has a bright prospect, should be looking to go so that you improve or get the most game time to prove yourself?
Well, the top of the list has to be Southampton without question. We've seen it, even though if you look at Southampton, they also are not any less in terms of a carousel for managers, but they seem to have a philosophy in place, a structure in place wherein they trust their young players, give them game time, and every season you find one or two of their, youth players, reserve players step up, be it Luke Shaw a couple of years ago or Jack Stephens this year. So it's something that's in the blood of the club, to trust these players, to allow them to give them a chance to prove themselves. And we could see that to an extent with Everton this year as well. They had a bunch of youngsters. That Calvert-Lewin,
Calvert-Lewin.
Calvert-Lewin. Can't remember the guy who plays right back.
Ben Davies. Not right back. I'm not saying the right back guy, but Ben Davies was one of the youth products as well.
Yeah. Isn't Ben Davies in Tottenham? But yeah, some Davies. Tom Davies.
I am so sorry.
Yeah. But you see the point. Like, it comes from the manager. I think the biggest issue with, you see in the last year, I'm just going to digress a little bit, but it's going to be about youth. In the last year or so, England or, British teams have gotten really far in these youth competitions, as which culminated with winning the Under-20 World Cup. I think they got to the finals of the Under-17 and whatnot. So there's a lot of young, good talent in England. But the problem there being, none of them would get a chance at the Premier League to prove themselves, unless they are like a showstopper. And in comparison, if you look at Germany, you look at Italy, you look at Spain, you would see majority of the Spanish national team, like the guys like Koke and Isco and all, they started playing professionally for their clubs when they were like 19, 20. Because of the trust shown in them. And you won't get to see that in the Premier League anymore because of the money involved, because of the need for results, because of the need to be safe in the Premier League.
So Sid, I want to bring you in real quick because there was one point that I caught which was a slight contradiction. I feel Southampton promote youth irrespective of the manager. So it's not a Claude Puel thing or a Koeman thing. Yep. So like you said earlier, it has to come from the club and the management itself. What do you, any further thoughts on that?
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Exactly. Southampton they choose to function the way they function right now. And, you talk about players wanting to go to a particular club. It's not as 17-year-olds that they choose Southampton. They choose Southampton as 7-8-year-olds because that's how much they trust the academy system. I mean, it's not just about football. Southampton's academy is so strong that parents themselves choose to send their kids to the Southampton Academy so that they can become better men and professionals once they're 16, 17 and ready to play. And of course, when they go to the likes of Southampton or Everton, they actually know that if I'm going to put in my 7-8 years, I'm going to end up in the first team when I'm 18 or 19.
If I'm good enough, yeah.
Yeah, if I'm good enough, which we've seen. Whereas if you go to the likes of now Manchester City have invested, billions and trillions in their youth academy. But what do they have to show? Iheanacho, who they're going to sell in the summer. So it's about having that trust both ways, where the players can trust that if I put in my effort, I'll end up in the first team. And likewise for the club with the player.
True. So I want to next talk about Spurs, who've also been known for promoting a lot of youth players. How would you sum up their season? Now they were second before, they were third before. They've come up to second now. If this was last year with 86 points, I believe is what they had, they would have won the Premier League. And they've made some tremendous improvements without spending a whole host of money. In fact, the one big signing that they made, Sissoko, was a flop. Sid, how do you sum up Spurs, and how can they continue the same way of operation where they don't go out and spend 200 million like the other top 3 or 4 clubs, which they can't, but still be successful and be competitive and hopefully win something next year?
We all have been super impressed with what Spurs have done over the last 3-4 years, and especially Pochettino. I don't think Spurs need to spend. I mean, they're one of the best squads in Europe right now, and they just need that uh, special player in the final third who can do it. I mean, Lamela kind of missed out the entire season. Vincent Janssen wasn't a good enough backup. There's talks of Sigurdsson maybe rejoining Spurs. So if he comes in, imagine what Sigurdsson, Eriksson, Ali, and Kane can do. So I don't think they need to spend. I mean, if Pochettino continues to be Pochettino and work his men the way he's been doing, and all the young guys put in their all, and if no one big, there's not a mass. As long as there's not a mass exodus, I mean, they'll be fine. If Kyle Walker leaves, they have is that Trippier on right back. So I mean, Spurs are set for the next 4 or 5 years. They shouldn't be worried.
So, Shannon, I want to get you in real quick. One thing that Spurs struggle with is a backup for Harry Kane. And I've seen this a few times with clubs that play with a lone striker. Think of Chelsea with Costa and not being able to give game time to anyone else. Or think of Giroud being pissed off this season because Sanchez was preferred up front or well back in the final. Similarly, for United, Zlatan was playing up front for the majority until Rashford stepped in towards the end. How do you sign someone who is a backup for Harry Kane and still get enough game time? It's this delicate balance where if Kane gets injured, their season can't get ruined, but at the same time, no one's going to be second choice to Kane.
Yeah, but that's where a little bit of scouting, maybe a little bit of shrewd signing helps. Right? For example, I guess we all can agree that Jermaine Defoe is one of the greatest goal scorers in the Premier League era, right? He scored for every team he's played for, and now he's going to sign for Bournemouth on free. Would he be a decent shout at Spurs as a backup? I mean, he's 34, he can still deliver, and Harry Kane is not going to play 60 games a season. So, something like that. Some what Spurs need is probably not like a world record breaking signing, but some smart signings where they can have players join them because believing in their project, in quotes. But I want to disagree a little bit with what Sid said. If there's a time for Spurs to make a statement that, hey, we have been on the periphery the last couple of years and we want to be serious the coming season, they need to go out and sign someone who's on the world class level.
But who do they sign? I mean, they
Gareth
can't.
Bale. Like, okay,
Right.
if you had a chance to sign Gareth Bale, Bale knows Spurs, he would come back. I mean, this is all hypothetical, right? But would you
Yes,
would you not spend all your transfer kitty on this one player who will improve you like 5 times, who's like a amazing attacking player, because the rest of your team is set, right?
I get what you're saying, but you also have.
Don't you think
I-
Gareth Bale would be a upgrade on Son?
For sure.
Yeah.
And why I think that won't happen, why I'm sure that won't happen, is because Spurs are going to play in a loaner stadium. A stadium where they'll be on kind of loan for one season at Wembley, and then they have to pay for their new stadium. So they don't have the funds to sign a Gareth Bale, which is why I said that the max they can go is like a 30-40 mil, and that too maybe one signing. That's kind of their budget for the next 2-3 years. So
Makes sense.
you can't get a Gareth Bale this season.
So to quickly interject here, one thing that Spurs has done really well this season is they've outran almost all their opponents, and that is something very tough to do on a consistent level. And it's also something that a new player is it's going to find it hard to adapt to. Sid, what is the secret of their success to such so consistently outrun opponents? What do you think has been that differentiating factor that Pochettino has brought in?
We spoke about this right when we started our podcast. I mentioned how impressive Pochettino is with his training drills. You know, he has that army-like mentality. The training is so hardcore, and you know, if it's not that he's going to tell 10 players to do something that is out of the way that no one can do, he himself will go out there, show them how to do it, and then the players feel that if my coach is doing it, why can't I do it? So he leads by example. And it shows on the pitch. I mean, the way they press and continue to press and press and press for the entire season, every game, Champions League, Premier League, Cup game. It shows what an amazing coaching team Pochettino has as well.
Nice, excellent. I want to move on to a surprise team, a mid-table team this season, Bournemouth. Bournemouth is a team that has surprised all of us by finishing mid-table. They kind of slid towards the bottom, but Eddie Howe has done a great job. I'd like to bring Shannon in. Shannon, what do you think of Eddie Howe? Is he going to get a chance in the top 6 in the next 2-3 years?
Top 6, maybe not. If you look at the top 6, they are all teams that want to make a statement, and as great as Eddie Howe is, signing him as manager would not really make any statement, right? But I have to give credit where credit is due. Bournemouth, they have in the past 3 seasons they got promoted to the Premier League, finished somewhere in the bottom half, and this year finished 9th, which is the top half of the table. And they're already making some shrewd signings with, as I mentioned, they signed Jermaine Defoe on a free. I think that's where someone like Bournemouth might plateau out. You look at, other than the top 6, you look at the other teams that are above Bournemouth are Everton and Southampton. And Southampton have been perennially in the top half of the table ever since they got promoted. And Everton are doing pretty well under Ronald Koeman. So I think for someone like Bournemouth, I think my aim, if I were, Eddie Howe for next season, would be try to consolidate the top half position, as well as maybe try to get a decent-ish run into one of the cups. A silverware would be a bonus, right? But I think for some team like Bournemouth, I think that might be as best as they get to.
So someone on the other end of the table that surprised us was West Ham, where they were expected to challenge for the top 4 or top 6, if I may say, and they failed miserably. Sid, what do you think of West Ham's performance? Was it just a one-season blip, or was this something bigger?
I mean, it's a mystery. It's been a roller coaster season for them. I don't think their signings have been great. I mean, Andy Carroll is more on the hospital bed than on the pitch. I think they signed Andre Ayew, who had a so-so season. One of their good signings was Jose Font, but I can name a couple of other failures. Simone Zaza was a disaster. They had Jonathan Calleri, I think, as a centre forward, who didn't work out. Lanzini was a spark once, but that was once Payet left. And Payet was, a big shock and loss to them. They signed Sofian Feghouli from Valencia, thinking he'd be, one to watch out for on the right wing, but nowhere to be seen. They thought they'd buy experience at right back with the Arbeloa from Madrid. Again, disappointment. So
now they got Zabaleta though.
Yeah, now they've got Zabaleta. So poor signings, I'd say, and also the players letting Slaven Bilic down. I think Slaven Bilic is a great coach, but the players didn't kind of stand up for him. Plus, they were, if you want to make an excuse, they're still relatively new at their stadium. So I don't see them making major inroads into the transfer market. It's just a lot of time on the training pitch and the players stepping up. I think they'll come good as far as top half of the table is concerned if the players play at their potential.
They seem like they have the money. They made a couple of 30 million bids, but I want to stick with Slaven Bilic and Eddie Howe and talk of the general perspective of managers in general. Last question. We see Barcelona and Borussia Dortmund hiring new managers, and these were names that were not on the top of anyone's list when they started looking. But how does it happen that such big clubs can sign relatively infamous people and still be good and successful? Shannon, what do you think of the overall perspective where English top six clubs always look for like a stellar signing of sorts?
Well, I guess the structure is set, right? Like if you look at Barcelona, for example, they have one way to play, and any manager that comes in tweaks it a little bit. Right? When we always knew Barcelona for tiki taka. When after Rijkaard left, Guardiola came in. He brought that false nine system with him, to add to their repertoire. Once Guardiola left, and I guess when Luis Enrique took over a couple of years ago, he brought Suarez in to add that muscle to to the strike force, so that Messi gets to share the workload. So there's already a blueprint set for a club like Barcelona. That's how they have played from like under 7 kids. The only thing is when the new manager comes in, he doesn't uproot everything. He just makes tiny little bit of adjustment to what he thinks can be improved in the team, and that's what managers do in a club like Barcelona. But for United or for Chelsea, there's not one. I mean, after Fergie and for Chelsea, there's not one way that Chelsea plays. There's no Chelsea way as such. So every manager that comes in brings his own ideas, brings his own personal, and thinks that okay, this might be the way to move forward. So I think that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on how Barcelona.
Good point. Sid, you want to chime in real quick before we call it an episode? What do you think of Dortmund? What do you think of Dortmund's way of promoting youngsters constantly, even while now they've had 2 or 3 managers in the last 5 years?
Again, same point. I'm going to repeat myself. It's Dortmund that choose to function that way, regardless of the situation they're in, regardless of the manager situation they're in. So they're going to lose Thomas Tuchel, but they're going to play the same kind of players. Then they're going to spend the same kind of money, and the new manager will kind of be expected to play the Dortmund way. Yeah. Nice. So yeah, they won't budge from the way they function.
Nice. Well, that sums up a relatively shorter episode. We have an exciting summer ahead of us. We're going to be talking about transfers the next season ahead. What are some of the requirements for each of the teams coming in this season? So look forward to that. But that's it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. This is the Three Wise Men signing off, and more to come in the future. Thank you. Goodbye.